morning, students. It's a pleasure to be in your class this morning. My name is Dr. Abiola Kalejaiye. This morning, we'll be going to be looking at summary writing and report writing. I want to believe that having passed through the secondary school, you have had reasons to take up summary exercises, especially for your SSC. I want to think that having gone through that at the SSC level, you may be wondering, why do you need summary writing at this point? Considering the fact that you are now an undergraduate student, you have to know that as you are progressing in your academic, you are going to be taking up bulky work. And when you're taking up bulky work, what that implies is that you have volumes of materials to deal with. When you have volumes of materials to deal with, then you have to learn to manage your space. You have to learn to manage your time. You also have to learn to manage how you generate ideas and how you make these ideas to become concise and brief. The essence of this class basically is to teach you the essence of brevity. As you're going for your classes, I want to believe that this is the week 6, you would have been exposed to quite a number of reading materials. Some are in PDF, while some are hard copies. When you have volumes of PDF to read and you have them in their hundreds, you may be having a level of anxiety how to digest these ideas and compress this in a form that you can actually go back to and read and have a good understanding and have a good grasp. So that is why we are going to be looking at summary writing as a topic in GST111. We'll also be looking at a report writing. Now you have left your parents' houses, you are now in a higher institution. There may be reason or occasion may demand that you write reports. It's important that you have a nitty-gritty, you have a grasp of what you're expected to do. If you look at the first slide I'm sharing with you, I have summary. If you're talking about summary has to be direct, it has to be precise, it has to be brief. At the same time, what cogent idea that you need to know, you need to have your at your fingertips must also be put into consideration. So when you're looking at summary, you have to learn to digest cogent ideas while sieving out irrelevancies and extraneous materials. So when you talk about summary writing basically is a condensed representation of facts written in the original text. So when you have, let's say you have a full A4 paper, a full length of paper, and you have ideas generated there, you can actually make this to become like a paragraph. Your paragraph, if you still remember what you're taught in secondary school, your paragraph should not exceed about 10 to 15 lines so that you can still manipulate your sentence usage. So when you're writing summary, it basically implies a condensed representation of a lengthy paragraph. So what does summary do? What does summary do? When you're writing summary, it basically tests your ability to understand and report accurately main points in a passage. If you look at these two words are highlighted here, you comprehend and report accurately. Comprehend means understanding. It means understanding. And when you report accurately, that means you are armed with the basic facts that the writer wants you to get. So when you have very lengthy passage, it's important that you understand that you should get the nitty gritty, get to the nip. You should be able to capture your ideas in few number of words. So that is the essence of summary. So when you have to visit the library and you have textbooks or you have PDFs that are in volumes, what you should test out is understanding this very lengthy passage and reporting accurately the main point in the passage. Now, when you talk about summary writing are of different types. Summary writing are of different types. Now, the first type of summary is called descriptive summary, from the word describe. Descriptive summary, from the word describe. When we talk about descriptive summary, it entails you depicting the original idea in a text rather than directly presenting the information it contains. So, when you have a passage in front of you, and that passage entails that you describe few things. You can actually describe without actually putting examples and illustrations. You can describe how something is done. You can describe how a scene looks like. You can describe how a person looks like without necessarily putting illustrations and examples. So, for example, you are told to describe your favorite teacher. I can say, my favorite teacher is Professor Tanimo. Professor Tanimo is 5 feet tall. He is light in complexion. He speaks English, French, and Yoruba fluently. You can see that I'm describing. I do not necessarily have to say, I can rule out illustrations like when I was in secondary school, it taught me extra classes. I can rule out illustrations like he asked of me. He takes the position of a father or is a father figure to me. Okay? When you're describing something, it means that you present ideas exactly the way it is expected to be. So when you have a descriptive summary, you should portray idea in an objective way. Okay. Now you should also know that when you're talking about presentation of ideas, you have what we call the subjective way and the objective way. When you have the objective way, that means you are presenting that idea logically with the facts, following the facts that you see, logical facts. But when you have presenting an idea in a subjective way, that means your own premeditated thought could influence your presentation of idea. So we're talking about presenting of idea. It is either portrayed in an objective way or a subjective way. But bearing in mind that summary entails you addressing and identifying the cogent ideas that are portrayed in a paragraph, you should know that you are expected to present it in an objective way. Because if you go the subjective way, you will be deviating from the original idea of the writer. Now, another type of summary is what we call evaluative summary. Evaluative summary. From the word evaluation, this is taken from the word evaluation. When you talk about evaluative summary, it entails the writer examining the original text to bring out the usefulness, the validity, the strength of argument or other important elements that the writer has put in a text. If you look at a paragraph, you will see that when you are developing, there's what we call developing of ideas. There's what we call the topic sentence. We have what we call the topic sentence. The topic sentence will basically mean the core, the core issue you are going to be discussing in that paragraph. So when you have a topic sentence, you're going to be having supporting sentences. You're going to be having supporting sentences to give to provide additional information on your topic sentence. So that about evaluative summary. So evaluation summary, you are trying to evaluate what the writer has said in the original text. And when you are evaluating, you are going to be bringing out the usefulness of the idea the writer has presented. The validity is, are the points, are they valid, or they are still hypotheses and needs to be tested. Then you're going to be looking at the strength of argument. Now, the points that are raised, are they strong? Are they convincing enough? That's what my strength of argument. At this point raised, are they convincing enough? So that's an example of what we call an evaluative summary. So when you go to the library, let's assume that you are taking up a course in philosophy. and somebody tells you that there is no God based on XYZ, or somebody tells you that the God factor is actually not important when it comes to what individuals face in life based on XYZ. So when you have a passage such as that, you're going to be looking out for the argument of the writer. What are the points the writer had pushed forward, and how valid, how how credible are these arguments? That's what you see in evaluative summary. Then we have what we called, when you talk about summarizing, there are methods that you deploy when you are summarizing. There are methods that you deploy when you are summarizing. Now, when you are summarizing, we have a method known as the outline method. We have a method known as the outline method. When we talk about the outline basically presents the plan of the written material. When you have an outline, for example, I want to write about my first day in the university. I can have outline, like outline number one can be my journey to the park. Outline number two can be um, my place of residence. Outline number three can be my journey to the permanent site in Olabisi Onabanjo University here. Outline number three can be my first lecture. So when you see those things are itemized, they are isolated. It will just be a sentence. But when you pick out the sentence, you will develop the sentence into a paragraph. You will write them in a prosaic form such that your idea flows and your reader can actually have a grasp of exactly what you're trying to do. Okay? Now, the outline does write out summary in a skeletal form. It also presents summary according to the order and the relation it has with other written material. Then another type of summary here is the abstract. When we talk about the abstract, if you by the time you continue with your academic journey, you'll be coming across what we call the abstract. The abstract basically presents major piece of article in a short version. When you see the abstract will tell you the what and why. The abstract will also reveal the how. The abstract will tell you the findings. The abstract will tell you the conclusion. And sometimes conclusion and recommendation, they go hand in hand. So when you see an abstract and you read the abstract can actually tell you if you want to continue reading that particular article. So sometimes when you have a text, you have a big text, you can actually open it and see what the abstract is. So the abstract from that abstract, we're going to see what has been done. Why is that thing done? Okay, what methods are deployed in carrying out that particular research? What are the major findings and what are the conclusions or recommendation? Okay, the next method of summary writing is what we call the synopsis. The synopsis. We talk about the synopsis. The synopsis presents the article in a brief form. In a brief form. Another thing you have to know with synopsis is that the presentation of ideas are in a chronological way. When you say something is chronological, you mean it follows from A to B to C to D up to Z. So when something is presented chronologically, it follows a logical order. It follows a logical order. And don't forget that when you're summarizing, you are trying to give us a concise version of what is inherent in a very lengthy passage. Now, what are the features of a good summary? When for example, you go to the library or you borrow a book from the library and you take the book home, you borrowed the book home for like a week or 2 weeks, and you said, okay, I have an A4 note where I summarize my reading. And you want to take this book subsequently to actually know if you are done justice to the book you said you have read. What are the things you should look out for? If you want to say, I have written a good summary, what are the things you should look out for? The first thing you have to identify with a good summary is that a good summary is very, very brief. So when something is brief, what that means is that the core of the issue is what is addressed here. The core issue is what is addressed here. Okay? Then another thing you should also look at is that those items you have been able to bring out as being the brief version or the concise version, are they relevant or is it relevant? Is it relevant to the overall message in the passage? You can have a passage, you're going to have illustrations, you're going to have examples. Now, those concise or the brief version that you have written, how relevant is that to the overall body of the work? It's important to look out for that. Then the third thing you have to consider, if you are watching out, if you have a good summary, is that is there a proper coverage of the passage? What is meant by proper coverage is that when you take a passage, there will be an introduction. You should be able to write something about your introduction. When you take a passage, there should be the body of the work. Okay? Now, what are the ideas that are presented? What are the arguments? Or what are the facts? What are the valid points that the reader has raised? Those are the issues you are going to be seeing on the body of the work. So, you're going to also going to have your conclusion. Your conclusion will mean a summary of what the person had written so far. That's what your conclusion is going to be. Now, let's assume that in summarizing, you wrote your introduction, you wrote some part of your findings, and you left your conclusion. It will now imply that you have not adequately covered the passage. I am trying to explain what I meant by proper coverage of the passage. So what that meant is that you should touch on the introduction, you should touch on the body, and should also touch on the summary of the passage. It's important to you pick, you pick a glimpse, I am sure that in the course of this lecture of GST111, you're going to be teaching types of reading comprehension passages. We have what we call the skimming, the scanning. Okay, so when you are reading, when you're trying to write a summary, it's important that you skim through the document. When you skim through a document, you are searching to get out a point. You are searching to get out the argument of the writer. So that is what you do when you are trying to summarize. You have a proper coverage of the passage. So you should be able to tell us what did the author say in the introduction. The introduction basically should also help you to know if you be hungry, when you want to drink an orange, the first suck of the orange should tell you if you want to continue with the remaining orange. So your introduction basically should should make you hunger to delve deeper into the body of the work. So let's assume that you said you have written a summary, you left out an introduction, just went to the body. Introduction, you are going to have why is the author interested in what he or she has written. That will be clearly stated in your introduction. But if you leave out the introduction, you just go to the body of the work, that means there is no intention that is set out in the first instance when the work was started or when it was initiated. That means there is no intention, which should not be. Okay, for everything, for every write-up, there should be an intention, there should be a purpose, there should be a goal. Okay, those are the things you should put into consideration when you say you are writing a good summary. Then the last but not the least here is clarity. Clarity, from the word clear. When you're writing a summary, what you have written, is it clear? What I meant by clarity is that from what you have generated as ideas emanating from the long passage, you should not deviate from the idea of the author. So, when I talk about clarity, I am trying to imply that whatever you have written is stating the exact purpose for which that thing was written at the initial. So clarity is very, very important when it comes to summary. Now, if you look at this slide you have here now, you will see that we have numbers. We have numbers. Now, the number that aligns that image shows a progression. The numbers that align in the image shows a progression, and you may be tempted. You may be tempted to see, okay, they are all numbers. They follow a particular sequence, and I think I can work with anything there. But if you look at the pencil on that image, you will see that there is a red dot, there is a dot, there is a focal point, there is the point of integration. Okay, that is what summary writing emphasizes on. That focal point, that intention, that desired goal. You have to, as if you're trying to throw an arrow. You're trying to throw an arrow, you must learn to be precise such that it's going to meet its target. So when you're writing summary, it's important as a scholar. I hope you know that from this moment henceforth, you may be addressed as scholars. So for you to be addressed as a scholar, it then entails that you would have read, you would have understood, and you can now replicate the message that you have understood in few number of words or sentences, as it were. Now, you have you have materials with you. You have materials that you need to work on. You have materials you need to digest before you write your examination. Okay. Now, when do you summarize? When do you summarize? Do I summarize? You can be asking yourself, do I summarize everything I ever stumble on? Sometimes when I'm in class, I tell my students, you can't be a Xerox. You can't be accurate. You can't be accurate. So when somebody is teaching you, it's important that you take down notes. When you take down notes, you would have, okay, in that line of thought, while I was in this class, I was able to get X, Y, Z. So when do you summarize? The first reason why every student should summarize is to show that you have understood a written material. You have a material either printed or in PDF, you have a textbook, and you said you have read this textbook. How do you prove to yourself that you have read this textbook? How do you tell your mates that you have actually understood what you have read in this textbook? So your summary should tell us that I have clearly understood what is written in this textbook. So to show that you have understood a written material, it is important you summarize. Why do you summarize? Why do I need to summarize? Number two, you summarize to keep notes that will help you remember what you have read. But we know that the human brain, I was teaching my students last week, I said, okay, I was asking for something, and I insist that every member of the class check. The reason why I insisted that they check was to make them remember. You know what you hear, the percentage of what you remember with what you hear is limited. But what you actively participate in. When you're actively involved in something, the chances that you'll remember will be higher than for you to just hear that thing. So when you said you have read, the note you write, you have read something. And sometimes you may even read, when you read something, you may try to write offhand. You're trying to remember what you have read. So you want to remember what you have read. It's important that you summarize in the way you would understand. But don't forget clarity, relevance, coverage of materials. All those are very, very important when it comes to you remembering what you have read. Now, when do you summarize? Well, you also summarize when you want to give an overview of the works of other scholars. For example, I want to describe prose literature. I can say Buckingham, 2004, defined prose as XYZ. I can come again and say FBO Akporobaro, 2012, defined prose as this. I can narrow my search downwards. I can say Da Silva define prose to mean this. So when you want to read, you will have position of different scholars about a single subject. So it's not possible that everybody will see something in the same way. A scholar can define prose as a continuous writing. Another scholar can define prose as a written document that shows fictitious storytelling. It depends on the dimension which a scholar has perceived something from, that will determine how they're going to view that thing. So if you want to have a position about what scholars have said, you can summarize also. So you're going to have this scholar in 2010, they find this as this. As research evolve, you have to also know that research evolve. So what I meant by research evolve is that if somebody says something as this in 2010, even the following day, when somebody else is writing a research on the same thing, you're going to see that there will be an addition, there will be a subtraction, sometimes there could be corroboration, or there could also be refuting of an argument. So corroboration means I agree with this scholar that this is this. When you refute, I do not agree totally based on XYZ. So those are the things that determines change in scholarship or variation, the variation that we have when it comes to scholarship or scholarly argument. Okay, now the next thing we're going to be looking at is how do you summarize? We said when do you summarize? Okay, the next one is how do you summarize? When you are summarizing, it basically entails that you make the ideas in a passage become precise. Precision has to do with brevity. Precision has to do with Precision has to do with still getting the core of the argument and putting it in your own words. So when you are summarizing, it is important that you recast, you change it to what you can relate with. Okay, there are some people's writing, when you read them, you see that this person is difficult. It's difficult to assess. I cannot comprehend what this person is saying. Now, when you're summarizing, you have to learn to recast sentences. You write it the simple is beautiful. I have a lecturer that will tell me that back then. He'll tell me keep it simple. Simple is beautiful. You don't have to try to show that you are a mastery of the English language or you have learnt new vocabulary. So when you keep it simple, you're going to use words that you can relate to it, words, phrases, clauses, simple sentences. compound sentences, and complex sentences. Don't forget that there's a progression. We have simple sentences, we have the compound, and we have the complex sentences. So the most important thing is write whatever you are summarizing, following this pattern, but ensure that you keep it simple. Okay? And also, you should be able to relate with what you have written. Not that you write something, you now kind of, what have I written? I do not seem to have an understanding, or do not seem to have a grasp. That will not be very, very good. Then, another thing you should also have to bear in mind when you are writing something is that you should avoid the use of figurative language. You must avoid the use of figurative language. What do I mean by figurative languages? Figurative languages like simile, I can say, um, she smiles brightly like the morning sun. Okay, she smiles brightly like the morning sun. If you have seen that in a passage, the writer would have written that to tell you, to show how that person smiles. When you are writing a summary, you are not expected to tell us how the person smiles. Yes, she loves to smile. I can say Sophia is a very pleasant girl. She smiles at anyone she comes across. That is simple enough. I don't have to say Sophia is a very pleasant girl. She smiles like the morning sun. So I don't have to say that. So when you're writing, you have to learn to avoid figurative language. Then another thing you should also take note of is important to avoid redundancy and repetition. Now, words that are redundant. When words are redundant means when words are just being overflowed. When words are just being overflowed, you have to ensure that you don't do that. Then repetition. For example, in your first paragraph, you can say mammals functions as. The second paragraph, I come to say again, is one of the function of mammal is reproduction. One of the functions of mammal is to ensure that there is no vacuum in the echo space. So by the time I repeat that function, it becomes monotonous and boring to whoever you have to take up what you have done. Then, if you have to summarize longer passage, how do you summarize longer passage? When I was teaching you a few minutes ago, I made mention of scanning, skimming, and paying attention to headings and subheading. When you scan a document, that means you look at it carefully. Okay, you just look at it to pick out ideas, to pick out the author's intention. When you skim, you read deeper. You read deeper. Then I will always tell my students in summary classes that it's important you read 2 or 3 times. When you want to summarize a passage, it's not important. It's not possible. I just read the passage and you go to the question and you are able to get the answer. When you have a passage ahead of you, the same thing with reading. We must not rule out the place of gift and natural talent. Some people are gifted, while some people have to read over and over and over again before they get to understand an idea. So when you have to summarize a passage, you have to learn to read 2 or 3 times. You have to learn to read 2 or 3 times. Okay? That is, but by the time you read about 2 or 3 times, you now go back to read the question. I'm sure when you are going back to read the passage again, you would have been able to see, okay, the first question is on paragraph 3, the second question is on paragraph 2, in that order. Then another thing you also have to do when you're summarizing a long passage is that you have to learn to break down the text into sections. When you see a passage, when a passage is very, very long, it becomes monotonous. And to avoid the monotony instances, you will see that those are broken into section. So in breaking down this passage into section, you will see that subtitles are provided. So if I look at this in this session, the next session I'll be looking at something else. So the breaking down of text into section, okay, is to help you get acclimated to the idea that is in that session. Then it's also important that you memorize the essential points. When you are writing a long passage, what are the core issues? In paragraph 1, I wrote about mammals. Paragraph 2, I wrote about plants. Paragraph 3, I wrote about the algae, the fungi. I can, whatever thing you are trying to summarize, you also have to be conscious that even when you're arguing a point, you're trying to develop ideas. Try to ensure that every paragraph have an idea. Even if you're going to continue an idea in the previous paragraph, that is when you have connecting verbs. That's when you have connecting words. You have connectors you can use additionally, also, and so on and so forth. Then also when you are trying to summarize a long passage, it's important to also write them in draft. Okay? When you have very, very lengthy passage, try to summarize them in draft. When you summarize them in draft, you can tag them. In this draft, this is what I have. In this second draft, this is what I have. And the third draft is what I have. That way you don't get confused. Now I have a very short summary exercise here, and I want us to follow carefully as we read this. Now, two items are being compared here. Two items are being compared here. And at the end of the summary passage, you're going to be having to answer a question. Now, look at this particular summary passage. I said, is it an ant? You wonder, or a termite. So we're trying to differentiate between an ant or a termite. We said ants resemble termites, but are quite different and can be easily distinguished in contrast to termites. Ants are usually dark in color. So we are trying to characterize ants from termites now. So ants are dark in color, one. Ants are hard-bodied and they have constriction between the thorax and the abdomen. Termites are light in color. They shed their wings. Flying ants do not shed their wings. Also, ants and termites belong to different orders. Okay, now we see that in that particular passage, we are trying to make a comparison. We're trying to make a comparison between an ant and a termite. Now, the next question here now should interest you. Now, if I want to summarize this passage, I can say, we have different categorization. And at the end of that passage, you said the ant and the termite, they belong to two different orders. So I ask you to select the best summary for this paragraph. I can say termites are lighter in color and they lose their wings at a certain stage of development. That is one way you can summarize. Another way you can summarize is that ants are dark in color, hard-bodied, and belong to a different order than termites. Now, the third summary says ants and termites are both insects and have many things in common. Number D, although ants resemble termites, they have differences and can easily be seen. So if you look at the differences we see there, the last option seems to be the best that would summarize, because if you take option number A, you have picked just one of the items that has been addressed. If you pick option number 2, you have picked a characteristics of one of the items. Number 3, you have categorized them on the same strata, and there is nothing that can be used as a distinguishing element. But option number D, we see that yes, these and these have similarities, they also have differences which are quite visible. So that is that about summary writing. Now let's quickly go to reports. When you talk about reports, I explained that some incidents may happen, some occasions may happen that will necessitate you to write a report. For example, let's say you are in the dormitory and there was a fire breakout, and the attention of the student union government was brought to it, or student affairs was brought to the occurrence, and you're told to write a report. I have an eyewitness report of what transpired. So basically, you have to know that a report is a written document of something that one has observed, something you have heard, something you have done, or something that has been investigated. A report is systematic, a report is well organized, presentation of facts and findings of an event that has taken place. So what this implies is that you can't possibly write a report when something has not taken place. Reports are written to tell us about something that has taken place. So basically, reports are used as a form of written assessment to find out what has been learned during reading or research. Okay? Now, talk about report writing. A report is a short, it's a sharp, a concise document. So if you look at the core of my lecture this morning, you're going to be seeing that I'm trying to help you to bring out how to identify logical arguments and bring out this argument in a very, very lengthy passage. You're going to be having to deal with a whole lot of documents, and it's important that you're not distracted. So let's just say those other illustrations and examples, can we call them distractions? They are not necessarily distractions, though. They are written in that passage to make the reader to have a deeper understanding. Okay, they are not distractions, but then there are still issues that the writer wants you to know, and that is what you should pay your attention to, either for summary writing or for report writing. So when you're writing a report, you are describing an event or you're describing a situation. So when you're also writing a report, you set out to analyze the situation and you make recommendation for future action. For example, you have witnessed a fire outbreak. At the end of the report, you're going to be saying that to forestall such argument or such occurrence in the future, I would recommend or I would advise that the electricity conduit or electricity socket of all the rooms should be placed outside so that students will not um, plug in their chargers and leave it overnight so that students will not forget their hot plate or hot plates will be banned on campuses and stuff like that. They are expected to give recommendations when you're writing a report. So in report writing, it's a bit formal and it has to do with a level of elaboration on a specific topic. Then you portray facts as it is. The tone on the report writing is always formal. Then you must know the motive for writing the report. So when you're writing a report, you have to know that the report basically helps you to set the cause of the fact focus. So when you're writing about the cause, the cause of the fire accident, they didn't say the report did not say did not say the victims. You're trying to write the cause. You can just make mention of, okay, they were victims in pattern. That would be in pattern. So it's important you know the motive for writing report. So what are the types of reports? We have long-term reports. For example, if you have a company, okay, you can have a report. For example, now 2024 is coming to an end. We are in November. So I can have a report for 2024, 2024. I can have financial reports for 2024. So we can have internal and external reports. For example, if I'm writing a report within my department, okay, that will be internal. If I'm writing, let's say I'm writing outside the school, that will become an external report. Then reports are usually periodic. Reports can be annually, it can be weekly, it can be quarterly. Reports it can be biannually, and as the organization deem it fit. Then reports can be formal and informal. Report is informational and analytical. Then there's what we call proposal reports. For example, you want to start a business, you are told to write a proposal. You would have gone to do feasibility study, and you'll be coming to say, if I do XYZ, chances are that I'm going to record it. If I put XYZ into consideration, this is going to be the outcome. So we have proposal report, then we have functional report. So we have different units according. I know, irrespective of the organization, we have different units. We have the marketing, we have the financial, we have the accounting, we have hospitality, we have different, we have the ICT. It can be a report from the ICT, it can be a report from the faculty. So we have different units. So those are the types of reports that we have. Then what are the elements that should make up a report? What are the elements of a report? When you have a report, there are basic elements that a report will basically have. We have the title page, we have the table of content, we have the abstract, we have the introduction, we have the body of findings, sometimes discussion, we have conclusion, we have recommendations, and we have the references. So when you're writing a report, your report basically should have these elements, these items should constitute your report. Then what if you may be asking, why do I really need to write a report? Is a report actually important? Is it useful? Is a report important? Is it useful? You may be asking yourself that question. Why do I need to write a report? It's important to write a report because a report is an effective means of communication within an organization. When you have an organization, and let's say the management or the CEO or the director wants to know what is happening in that organization, telling a unit to write a report would give that individual the opportunity to have at a glance what has been going on. It will give the management, the business owner, it will give them a glimpse or a glance of exactly what has been going on. So a report acts as an effective means of communication. So what I meant by communication here is that the staff, the employees are communicating. They are telling the management, this is what happened, this is what is happening. Then another thing about a report is that it provides feedbacks to employees when reports are sent. For example, final year students, before they write their examination, their questions will be sent out, okay, for moderation. And after these questions are sent out, when the student finish writing the exams and the scripts are graded, they will take the graded script out again. So when these graded scripts are taken out again, it's what we call examiner's report. In this examiner's report, the lecturers that taught the students, that assess the students are assessed. They are assessed. Okay. So if an examiner's report comes back, the lecturer would have a feedback on what he has or she has done. Are the questions, is it in line with the outline? Is the marking guide appropriate? Is the marking is the marking is it spread? Those are the feedback. Those are the kind of feedback that the lecturer is likely to get. So when you see report writing basically provides feedback to employees. Then another thing you should note about report writing is that it is prepared for the information of guidance of others connected with the matter. Okay? So what is meant there is that, let's assume that the management cannot be everywhere. So, but they still need to know what is going on in a particular unit. So what this report does is that it tells the management that this and this is what is happening in this particular unit. So it provides information and guidance to whoever will be interested in knowing what the problem is. Then another thing is also does is that it provides reliable data which can be used in planning and decision making progress. It provides available data which can be used in making progress. Now, what other thing does the report do? The reports also serve as a treasure house for reliable information for timing, time planning and decision making. So when you have a report, it's going to help the management to plan adequately, either for long time or to make few decisions. Then another thing about report writing is that it provides information we may not be known previously. So it's important that whatever we do, we are guided either in the nearest future or for basic things that needs to be done. So far so good. We have been able to look at summary writing and report writing. If you want to get the notes, apart from the slide, I shared slides to make the work very, very effective and to make the teaching to be quite understandable. You refer to page, chapter 8 of your GNS course material. I want to believe that you have had a great time listening to this lecture. Thank you for listening.